9 months after the divorce, he saw her pregnant and realized she never had an abortion. Hi, my beautiful family. I speak to you today with a heart full of love, but also with truth. Our channel is built on your strength, your love, and your support. Every story I write is written with tears, with passion, and with prayer for each one of you. But my family, I see the channel going down because many forget to like, many forget to comment. It hurts me because it feels like my hard work is left unseen. I ask you today, not just as a creator, but as your brother who truly loves you. Please, whenever you watch, give your love back. A simple like, a simple comment keeps this family alive, keeps our light shining, and gives me the power to bring you more and more beautiful stories. May God bless every woman in this family with honor, with dignity, and with unshakable strength. May every man be blessed with wisdom and respect. May our children rise higher than mountains, and may every home be filled with endless love and peace. Amen. If your heart is true, write present. If your love is real, write in the comment where you're watching from. I want you to picture this. A quiet Tuesday evening. The grocery store is humming with ordinary life checkout beeps, carts rattling, a baby crying somewhere in the distance. Ethan is just there for a frozen pizza and maybe a six-pack, trying to shake off the routine loneliness that always follows him home since the divorce. And then he sees her, Maria, his ex-wife, standing in the next aisle with her cart piled high diapers. Wipes, formula stacked like little monuments to a truth he wasn't supposed to see. For a second, his brain can't even process it. His breath catches in his throat. His feet freeze, like if he stands still long enough, maybe this scene will vanish. But it doesn't. She shifts the cart, one hand cradling a small bundle against her chest. A baby, her baby, and Ethan feels the world tilt. Because 9 months earlier, Maya had sat across from him at their kitchen table, hands shaking, eyes brimming with tears, and swore she couldn't go through with the pregnancy. She told him she'd had an abortion. He'd held her while she cried. He'd grieved with her. He'd signed divorce papers not long after, believing their marriage had cracked under the weight of loss. Except now here she was, and she hadn't lost anything. She had just lied. The air around him thickened. His chest felt hollow, like someone had reached in and scooped everything out. Was this his child? Or was it proof she'd been living a double life all along? The questions hit harder than any argument they'd ever had. Ethan wasn't just looking at betrayal. He was looking at the collapse of every truth he thought he knew, and if you've ever been blindsided like that by a secret so sharp it carves the ground out from beneath you, you'll understand why this story doesn't stay in that grocery aisle. What Ethan uncovered after that night didn't just change how he saw Maya. It changed how he saw himself, his marriage, and the child who might or might not be his. Because this wasn't just about love. This wasn't even just about betrayal. This was about trust, about fatherhood, about a man who realized, far too late, that the person he vowed to build a future with had been building her own behind his back. And what came next? Well, let's just say it wasn't simple. It wasn't pretty. And it definitely wasn't forgettable. But before we dive into the messy details, a quick note. Hey, if you love stories where justice isn't just served, it's plated cold, and with receipts, hit that subscribe button. These videos take hours of writing, editing, and frankly, emotional recovery from second-hand rage. So your support, it means the world. Now, back to Ethan, the man staring at his ex-wife in the middle of the baby aisle, heart pounding with a question that would define everything. Had she lied just to break him? Or had she lied to hide something far, far worse? And that, my friends, is where our story begins. Ethan and Maya's story started the way a lot of whirlwind romances do, fast, passionate, and a little reckless. They met at a friend's party, sparks flying so quickly that within months they weren't just dating, they were planning a wedding. Everyone around them said it was too soon, too much, too fast. Ethan laughed it off, saying, "When you know." But looking back, he realized what he really knew was how to ignore red flags. Maya was beautiful, magnetic, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and turn every head without trying. Ethan was ordinary by comparison, steady job, steady heart, nothing flashy. He thought her fire needed his calm. What he didn't understand was that her fire had its own fuel, and it didn't come from him. The first cracks were small. She always kept her phone face down. She texted late into the night, smiling at a glow she never shared with him. When he asked, she'd roll her eyes. "You're paranoid, Ethan. It's just work, or my friends." And maybe he believed her. Or maybe he just wanted to, because for every cold shoulder, there was also a kiss on the cheek. For every vague excuse, there was a promise that tomorrow would be better. Ethan clung to those promises like lifelines, convincing himself that love was supposed to be hard, that marriage wasn't a fairy tale, it was compromise. Then came the news. Maya sat him down at their kitchen table, fingers twisting in her lap, eyes red but shining. "I'm pregnant," for Ethan. It was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He pictured tiny hands wrapped around his finger, sleepless nights that didn't feel like sacrifices but like gifts. He thought, finally, this could be the thing that binds them back together. But hope has a cruel way of flipping into heartbreak. Just a few weeks later, Maya's tears came again. Only this time, they weren't tears of joy. She told him she couldn't do it, that their marriage was too fragile, too toxic, that bringing a child into this mess would be selfish. "I made the appointment," she whispered, voice cracking. "I'm getting an abortion." Ethan's chest caved in. He wanted to argue, to beg, to say he could be better, that they could be better. But what could he do? It wasn't his body. It wasn't his choice. All he could do was nod, choke back his grief, and hold her while she cried. Except he was the one who broke. He spent nights staring at the ceiling, listening to her soft, even breathing beside him, and wondering how she could sleep while his mind was at war. He told himself he'd support her, no matter what. That's what a good husband did. But every morning, he woke up emptier. The fight started soon after. Sharp words over nothing. Long silences that stretched into days. Maya became distant, like a stranger walking around in his house. Ethan tried to fix it, flowers, date nights, gentle questions, but it was like patching a sinking ship with paper tape. The truth, the abortion wasn't just the end of a pregnancy. It was the end of them. By the time the divorce papers hit the table, Ethan didn't even argue. He signed them with trembling hands, feeling like a man burying not just a marriage, but a dream he'd carried since the day she first said, "I'm pregnant." And when the door shut behind him for the last time, he told himself it was over, that he'd done his grieving, that one day, maybe, he'd heal. But life has a way of keeping secrets. And for Ethan, the biggest one was still waiting 9 months later in the baby aisle of a grocery store. 9 months had passed since the divorce. Ethan had settled into a rhythm: work, gym, quiet dinners at home. His life wasn't exciting, but at least it was steady. The kind of steady you cling to after your world collapses. He told himself he was healing, that the worst was behind him, until the grocery store. It was supposed to be a simple errand: grab some bread, maybe a frozen lasagna. But fate doesn't check your shopping list before it smacks you across the face. There she was, Maya taught a tea first. He almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her shoulders hunched in a tired, motherly way. And then he saw the cart. Formula, diapers, wipes, and nestled against her chest, swaddled in soft fabric, a baby. Ethan froze. The world around him blurred into static. He couldn't hear the beeps at the register or the chatter of shoppers. All he could hear was the pounding of his own heartbeat, hammering out one brutal truth. She had never had the abortion. The lie hit him harder than the divorce ever did, because the divorce had been an ending. But this was a rewrite of everything. He remembered her sobbing at their kitchen table, whispering, "I can't do this. It'll destroy us." He remembered holding her, telling her he understood. And he remembered the emptiness that followed the grief of losing a child he never got to meet. But he hadn't lost anything. She had simply stolen it from him. His mind spiraled. Was the baby his? The timeline matched. The due dates aligned. Every detail lined up with one devastating possibility. That child might be his flesh and blood. Anger flooded in, hot and sharp. But underneath it was sorrow so heavy it nearly buckled his knees. He wanted to storm over, to demand answers, to shake the truth out of her. But another voice, quieter, cut through the chaos. Not here. Not like this. So he stayed rooted to the spot, watching as Maya adjusted the blanket around the baby, her lips curling into a smile Ethan had almost forgotten she had. It was maternal, soft, a smile she had once promised him, but had saved for someone else. And in that moment, Ethan realized something chilling. The abortion hadn't just been a lie to escape motherhood. It had been a lie to escape him. He left the store with empty hands. He didn't remember walking to his car, didn't remember starting the engine. What he remembered was the image of the baby's tiny fist poking from the blanket, impossibly small, impossibly fragile, on the drive home. The questions gnawed at him. Why lie? Why shut him out? Was she protecting herself or protecting the secret of who the real father was? Ethan couldn't sleep the night. He sat on his couch, staring at nothing, replaying every moment of their marriage through this new, brutal lens. The late nights, the guarded phone, the sudden coldness. It all made sense now. The abortion had been the perfect cover story. While he mourned, she prepared. While he signed away his marriage, she built a new life with a child he might never know. And that thought is that my child, it wouldn't let him go. Imagine grieving a child, only to discover they're alive. Imagine realizing the person who swore to love you through everything had orchestrated your grief. It's the kind of betrayal that doesn't just hurt. It hollows you out. Ethan wanted answers, but he also knew the danger of confronting her empty-handed. Maya was manipulative. If he charged in with nothing but suspicion, she'd twist it, make him look bitter, unstable, obsessed. No, if he wanted the truth, he needed proof. So he waited. And that's the moment I'll throw the question to you. Watching this, what would you have done? Would you march down that aisle, confront her right there, force the truth out in front of strangers? Or would you walk away, like Ethan did, until you had the evidence in hand? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I promise. This one's a moral maze. Because Ethan's choice to walk away wasn't weakness, it was strategy. And what he uncovered next, it wouldn't just shake Maya's carefully built world. It would tear it apart, piece by piece. Ethan didn't sleep after that grocery store run. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that baby tiny fingers curling, chest rising with soft breaths. His chest tightened with each thought. Was that my child, or the proof of something far worse? By morning, he knew one thing. He couldn't let this lie sit unanswered, but Ethan wasn't reckless. He'd learned the hard way that charging into Maya's world without evidence was like stepping into quicksand. The more you struggled, the deeper you sank. So instead of confronting her, he opened his laptop. If the truth was out there, it had to leave a trail. The first place he checked was their old joint bank account. Divorce had split most things down the middle, but statements from the past year were still archived. And there it was, withdrawals he didn't remember making, hotel stays, dinners at places he'd never been. One receipt even had a second meal, ordered on nights Maya had sworn she was working late. The knot in his stomach tightened. She hadn't been working late. She'd been with someone else. He scrawled deeper, his pulse climbing. Hidden in the records was a pattern, neat and undeniable. While Ethan had been budgeting for rent and groceries, Maya had been funneling money into weekends away. 2 lives, bankrolled by 1 paycheck his, but he needed more than numbers. Numbers could be explained away. Work dinners, business trips, misunderstandings. Maya was good at spinning lies into silk. Ethan needed something she couldn't spin. So he turned to the people who'd been there all along. Friends, mutual acquaintances, the ones who always seemed to know more than they said. At first, they hesitated. No one wanted to be the messenger caught in the crossfire. But eventually, whispers spilled. A co-worker remembered seeing Maya at a bar, laughing too closely with a man who wasn't Ethan. Another recalled running into her at a restaurant hours away from home. She hadn't been alone. Piece by piece, a picture formed. And then finally, he got a name. The other man. Ethan looked him up. A co-worker of Maya's, smiling in LinkedIn photos, polished in a suit. The kind of guy who shook hands with your boss while secretly texting your wife. Seeing his face, Ethan's heart didn't just break. It hardened, because now it wasn't speculation. It was betrayal with a first and last name. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the glow of the computer screen. The timeline was undeniable. Maya hadn't just lied about an abortion. She'd carried on an affair under his roof, on his dime, while he worked overtime to build the life she pretended to want, and the baby. That was the cruelest question of all. Was this child a product of love he once thought was theirs, or proof of a double life she'd been living all along? The walls of his apartment felt smaller that night. He remembered every time he'd asked her, gently, "Are you okay? Is something wrong?" And how she'd snapped. "You're imagining things, Ethan. Stop being so insecure." Turns out, his insecurity hadn't been the problem. His loyalty had taught it wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't even just an affair. It was fraud. Emotional, financial, marital. She'd cashed in his devotion like a blank check while building her future with someone else. And here's the thing about betrayal. Sometimes it bleeds you slowly, and sometimes it rips the floor out from under you in one clean motion. Ethan was standing in the middle of both. He closed his laptop with shaking hands. The baby's face burned into his mind. He'd been lied to about fatherhood, about marriage, about money. And that's when the realization hit him. Cold and sharp. This wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. Ethan didn't storm into Maya's house. He didn't shout in the street or demand answers at her door. No, he'd learned enough to know that rage only burned fast and left you empty. If he was going to survive this, he had to play a longer game. So he booked a quiet consultation with a lawyer. No theatrics. No threats, just a man sitting across from someone who knew how to turn heartbreak into strategy. The office smelled faintly of leather and coffee. Diplomas lined the wall, framed in polished oak. Across the desk sat Daniel Ross, family law veteran. Calm eyes, measured tone. Ethan told his story in halting bursts. The rushed marriage, the lies, the abortion that wasn't, and finally, the baby. Daniel listened without interruption. When Ethan finished, he folded his hands and said evenly, "If you want truth, we start with paternity. If you want justice, we build on financial misconduct. And if you want both," he paused, "then we need patience." Ethan swallowed hard. "So what you're saying, I can't just confront her?" The lawyer leaned back, voice cool as steel. "You could, but you'd lose. Play it smart. Paper trails tell louder truths than angry words." And that became Ethan's mantra. Paper trails, not outbursts. He authorized Daniel to begin. Court filings were drafted. Subpoenas lined up. Back records. Phone logs. Even old emails. Everything Ethan suspected could now move from whispers to evidence. The slow burn began, while the legal gears turned. The social fallout started to ripple. Secrets never stay secret forever. Word spread in fragments, first through whispers at Maya's workplace, then across the family grapevine. Ethan didn't push it. He didn't need to. People talk. They always do. Her sister called him late one night, voice low, like she was betraying a code. "I don't know what's going on, Ethan, but Maya hasn't been honest." "You deserve to know that." His mother, meanwhile, sat at his kitchen table, folding and refolding a dish towel. "I knew something was wrong," she said softly. "The way she kept you at arm's length. I just didn't want to believe it." It wasn't sympathy Ethan wanted. It was acknowledgement, proof that he hadn't imagined it all. But sympathy came anyway from unexpected places too. Mutual friends who once brushed off his concerns now circled back with guilt in their eyes. Some distanced themselves from Maya entirely. Others stayed loyal to her, insisting Ethan was exaggerating. Lines were drawn, sides chosen, and Ethan, he stayed silent. Because silence made people uneasy. It made them wonder what he knew that they didn't. Behind the scenes, the legal process gained momentum. Daniel filed for paternity testing. The first real strike, Maya predictably resisted. She claimed Ethan was harassing her, claimed he had no right to interfere in her new life. But the request went through. The court date loomed. Ethan rehearsed the moment in his head 1,000 times, her face when the results came back. The silence in the room when truth settled like dust. But truth has a way of taking its time. Until then, he busied himself with the financial case. Daniel had dug into Maya's transactions and found the evidence Ethan had only half dared to hope for. Consistent transfers from their joint account, funding her weekends away, her secret outings with the other man, marital waste, Daniel explained, tapping the papers. She diverted assets for her affair. Judges don't like that. Ethan nodded, jaw tight. So she stole. Exactly, Daniel said. And the court will see it that way. It wasn't rage Ethan felt in that moment. It was something colder, a steady burn. She hadn't just broken vows. She'd siphoned years of his hard work into building a life with someone else. And now, finally, there was proof. Meanwhile, rumors took on a life of their own. At the grocery store, Ethan overheard two neighbors whispering, their voices dipping when he passed. At church, an old family friend avoided his eyes. Maya's parents even called him icy. Clipped voices, accusing him of dragging family business into court. Ethan didn't fight them. He simply said, "I didn't drag this anywhere. Maya did. I'm just following the truth." Silence. Then the call ended. For every person who turned away, another reached out. His cousin offered to testify about the nights Ethan worked double shifts while Maya went missing. A co-worker sent him screenshots of Maya's social posts, pictures that contradicted her excuses. The community was dividing, and Ethan stood at the center, saying very little. Because Daniel was right. Paper trails told louder truths than angry words. The custody question, though, that was the hardest. One evening, Ethan sat in Daniel's office again, staring at the floor. "If that baby's mine," he whispered, "I want to be there. I don't care what Maya says." Daniel leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Then we fight for custody. Shared, at the very least. But be warned, this will get messy." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Messy? My life already is." The lawyer didn't smile. "This is where you decide, Ethan. Do you fight for that child, or cut all ties?" And there it was, the impossible question. What would you do? Would you fight for custody, or walk away and let the past rot where it lay? Would you fight for custody, or cut all ties? The envelope was plain. No stamps, no decoration, just a weight heavier than any paper should carry. Ethan sat at his kitchen table, the sound of the refrigerator humming in the background, hands trembling as he tore it open. Inside, one line screamed louder than all the others. Probability of paternity, 99. 98. Ethan was the father. The room tilted for a moment. Relief, sorrow, and fury collided in his chest. His child, his flesh and blood, was out there. But so was the lie that had stolen 9 months of fatherhood from him. News didn't stay quiet for long. Court filings had a way of echoing, and soon the whispers spread. By the time Ethan attended the next hearing, the gallery was full of watchful eyes, neighbors, co-workers, even distant relatives who suddenly wanted front row seats to the fallout. Maya arrived late, baby in tow, chin lifted in defiance. But the mask she wore began to slip the moment the judge read the results into the record. Gasps rippled through the room. Maya's mother covered her mouth. Her sister looked away. Ethan didn't move. He didn't need to. The truth was doing the work for him. Outside the courthouse, the perfect image Maya had curated for so long started to fracture. The devoted wife she'd once bragged about, being the one who had claimed heartbreak and tragedy after her supposed abortion, was gone. In her place stood someone cornered by her own lies. Her co-workers whispered in hallways. Friends who once filled her social feeds with hearts and emojis now vanished. And family dinners, from what Ethan heard, they turned into interrogation chambers, with every relative demanding, "Why didn't you just tell the truth?" Maya tried spinning the story. She claimed Ethan had abandoned her, that she'd had no choice. But facts are stubborn, and facts were exactly what Ethan had: bank records, court documents, paternity proof. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. He simply laid down the evidence like cards on a table, one after another. Quiet dignity became his weapon. One night, at a mutual friends gathering, the tension finally boiled over. Maya tried to corner him, eyes flashing. "You think this makes you some kind of hero?" she hissed. Ethan didn't flinch. "No," he said softly. "It just makes me a father. Something you never let me be." The room went still. No one defended her. Not this time. And the dominoes kept falling. The other man surfaced, not willingly, but dragged by the weight of exposure. Turns out, he wasn't eager to be known as the guy who hid behind Maria's lies while Ethan unknowingly funded their rendezvous. His own reputation cracked, friends distancing themselves, colleagues losing respect. Maya's world shrank. The community she thought she could manipulate now looked at her with suspicion, even pity. Meanwhile, Ethan's world, though still bruised, began to steady. People saw the difference. He wasn't the man shouting in anger, throwing accusations into the void. He was the man who stood with truth, even when it broke him first. And if you've ever seen lies unravel, you know it's never just one thread. Maya's finances came under scrutiny. The court reviewed her withdrawals, her business trips, her sudden unexplained purchases. Judges don't like dishonesty. And with every receipt, every transfer, the scales tipped further against her. For once, Ethan didn't feel powerless. because this wasn't vengeance. It wasn't about making her hurt the way he had. It was about reclaiming what was his child, his dignity, his voice. But here's the kicker. Through it all, Ethan never once called her names, never stooped to public smear campaigns. He didn't need to. Her lies had already written the story. He just provided the ending, and that, maybe, is what made it sting the most for Maya. The world didn't see Ethan as vindictive. They saw him as patient, honest, a father who fought quietly but relentlessly. For truth, Maya, on the other hand, her name became shorthand in the community for betrayal. People would shake their heads and mutter, "Don't pull a Maya. It was brutal." But she had written that script herself. So here's the question I'll throw to you, because honestly, I'm curious, after everything, after the deception, the stolen months, the humiliation in court, do you think Maya deserves forgiveness or just consequences? Do you think Maya deserves forgiveness or just consequences? It came in the form of a letter, not a text, not an email, but a handwritten envelope slid beneath his door like something out of a bygone era. The kind of gesture meant to look heartfelt. Ethan hesitated before opening it. For days, he'd been the one holding the silence, letting facts and truth do the talking. But curiosity, maybe even a sliver of old habit, made him unfold the paper. Maya's handwriting spilled across the page, rushed and uneven. She wrote of sleepless nights, of mistakes made in fear. She painted herself as cornered, misunderstood. She insisted she still loved him, that she never meant for things to spiral this far. The letter was peppered with half apologies and careful phrasing, each sentence bending just enough to admit regret without ever surrendering blame. One line read, "You have to believe me, I didn't want to hurt you. I was only protecting myself." Ethan read that twice, then set the paper down. Protecting herself, not the baby, not the marriage. Herself, that said it all. He didn't write back, didn't call, didn't rage. Instead, he left the letter sitting on his desk, tucked between custody filings and paternity results, the silent evidence of who she really was. And here's the thing. Silence has a gravity of its own. When someone expects outrage, expects a scene, and all they get is stillness, it shakes them deeper than 1,000 shouted words ever could. Days turned into weeks, and Maya tried again. Emails, voicemails, even showing up at places she thought he might be. Each attempt was more frantic than the last, but Ethan never answered. He didn't need to, because by then, the truth had already been spoken in louder ways, in courtrooms, in custody rulings, in the quiet shift of public opinion. His silence wasn't avoidance. It was clarity. It was the refusal to be dragged back into the chaos she thrived in. Sometimes justice isn't loud, it's undeniable, and in Ethan's case, it wasn't a single climactic confrontation. It was Maya realizing that no matter what she said, no matter how she tried to spin the story, he had moved beyond her reach. Her letters sat unopened after that first one, piled in a drawer, collecting dust. He didn't need to burn them, didn't need to tear them to shreds. Just leaving them unread was enough, because the truth, the final showdown, wasn't between Ethan and Maya. It was between Maya and her own lies, and she lost. Tell me, if you were Ethan, would you have written back, or would you have let silence speak for you? Would you respond to Maya's letter, or let silence do the talking? Peace didn't arrive overnight. It wasn't some cinematic moment where Ethan woke up, stretched, and thought, "Well, I am finally free." No, it crept in slowly, like sunlight slipping through blinds after a long night. Quiet, unassuming, but steady. At first, peace looked like small victories. Cooking dinner without a knot in his stomach, sleeping through the night without replaying old arguments, picking up his child for the weekend and realizing this was his new reality. Not broken, not ruined, just different. He didn't chase closure. He built it. Ethan drew lines where there had once been blurred edges. Boundaries became his foundation. With custody settled, every conversation with Maya was strictly about their child. No late-night texts, no, we need to talk, just logistics. Pick-up times, doctor's appointments, facts not feelings. And strangely enough, those walls didn't trap him. They freed him. Friends noticed first. You look lighter, one said. Like you finally dropped a weight you didn't know you were carrying. They were right. Meanwhile, Maya and the other man weren't exactly thriving. Their relationship, born from lies and secrecy, started to buckle under the very pressure they thought they'd escaped. He wasn't the shiny escape hatch she once imagined. He was a reminder of everything she'd gambled and lost. Arguments leaked through the grapevine. Family stopped covering for her. That golden image she'd fought so hard to polish, it was gone. And here's the irony. Ethan didn't have to lift a finger. Their downfall was self-inflicted. For Ethan, the real revenge wasn't some grand gesture. It was living better, reclaiming joy, becoming the father he always wanted to be, without her lies clouding the air. He started running again, signed up for a community woodworking class, even took his kid to their first little league game, standing proudly in the bleachers, not as the ex-husband, but as dad. There was something healing about those ordinary moments, something louder than any courtroom victory or whispered rumor. One evening, a friend asked him, "Do you ever wish you could go back and change it all? Avoid her, the marriage, the pain?" Ethan thought about it. The years lost, the betrayal, the storm he'd endured. And then he shook his head. "No," he said, "because I wouldn't have my kid. And I wouldn't have learned just how strong I could be." That's the thing about closure, it doesn't come with fireworks. It's the calm that follows when you stop feeding chaos and start choosing yourself. Maya and her partner continued to wrestle with their own mess. Their struggles were visible, sometimes humiliating, but Ethan no longer flinched. It wasn't his circus, not his fire to put out. His focus was forward, not back, and maybe that's the lesson here. Revenge isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's rebuilding stronger while they crumble under their own choices. Ethan didn't burn her world down. She did that all by herself. What he did was build something better brick by brick, day by day, until his life was no longer defined by her betrayal, but by his resilience. And that, in the end, was justice enough. And that's where Ethan's story leaves us, not broken, not bitter, but stronger. He walked through betrayal that could have hollowed him out. Instead, he came out with dignity intact, boundaries set, and a new life that was truly his own. That's the thing about betrayal. It cuts deep. It steals time. It makes you question everything you thought was solid. But when the dust settles, truth has a way of shining through. And for Ethan, that truth wasn't just about uncovering lies. It was about reclaiming his voice, his child, and his future. Think about it for a second. What would you have done in Ethan's shoes? Confront her in the grocery store, walk away quietly, or wait, gather proof, and let the truth do the heavy lifting? There's no easy answer. And maybe that's why stories like this sting so much. They force us to imagine our own choices in the middle of chaos. But Ethan's choice reminds us of something powerful. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's found in silence, in patience, in building a life so steady that the lies around you collapse on their own. And if you found this story as cathartic as I did, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe. These scripts take hours of writing, editing, and let's be honest, recovering from second-hand rage. Your support helps us keep unearthing stories where karma doesn't just knock, it comes dressed to kill.